In this segment, we'll be talking to Dr. Cindy Acker, and she will be giving us some very specific and actionable advice on ways to reduce our spending. She's going to be talking to us about negotiating with the people that we owe money to, negotiating with our creditors. So we'll be talking about utilities, landlords, anyone who would like money from us and money we presumably don't have or have less of than we wish. And she'll help us to figure out how we talk to them about paying less and or deferring our expenses, maybe even being forgiven some. Again, I think you'll find this advice that she has very, very useful. And I want to tell you a little bit about her first, though. She's a remarkable person. Dr. Cindy Acker is someone I've admired for many years. I've heard her speak at multiple keynotes, and she's a very powerful speaker. She's also quite accomplished. Dr. Acker has over 3 decades of educational leadership, and she's founded 6 private Montessori schools. She's the current principal of one of these, the Child Unique Montessori School in California. She has a BA in Human Development and a master's degree in Cultural Studies, Spirituality. She has another master's in Educational Leadership. In 2016, she received a doctorate in Educational Leadership from UC Berkeley. In the public policy arena, Dr. Acker has served 2 terms as president of the Professional Association for Childhood Education, PACE, and as vice president of the National Child Care Association. She is the public policy advisor for the Montessori Council of California, and she's active in state and national policy concerning education and pediatric health. Right now, Dr. Acker is one of the coaches in the Montessori Foundation's collaborative effort to try to help schools that are struggling. She's helping with finances and mentoring many schools through this difficult time. She's a published author, and as I mentioned, Dr. Acker is also a keynote speaker at many national associations. But apart from her education, she's a singer. Dr. Acker is a singer and a choir director in Novato, and she's a mother of 3 adult children. Just to top it off, Dr. Acker speaks Dutch and Spanish. She's a remarkable woman and just brilliant. I'm sure you will get a lot out of the following interview. Cindy, what should we do?
The first thing is some inner work. I think that we all need to do. It's challenging for many people to ask for help and to voice their need, or to voice their challenge. And I think that's a piece that a lot of us tend to grapple with. I think as teachers, if we were teachers in the classroom, we're used to children knowing that we've got it, and parents feeling like we've got it. And that as a head of school, it often makes an individual feel as though they are less than or incapable if they voice the fact that they have a need or ask for help. And the guilt around that, the shame around that just really have no place when you really need to protect your school and your staff. And you have to look at the sustainability of your school, because there's nothing to feel guilty about, especially now. Everyone is having a challenge in one way or another. And so it's important to be able to put that aside and ask yourself the why, get past the reasons, because if we're all having difficulty, then we all know that in one way or another that we're having a challenge. It doesn't mean that a school has been incapable just because something has gone wrong. We have hiccups in life all of the time, and we look at it, we acknowledge it, and we move forward. And those are the things that are really, really inherent within any leader and inherent within the sustainability of any school or organization, is that you look at what you need to look at, you acknowledge it, and then you chart your course of moving forward. And a part of that course often involves asking for assistance or asking someone to take a look at your situation and to help you with it so that you can just move in the direction that you need to. And so I think out what I'm going to say according to the creditor that I'm needing to look at. So I look at my accounts payable and who are the people who are within that. And the very first thing that I do is to tackle any standing payables that you know are something that had hit you every single month. And so I look at utilities, and most utilities you can chart those in the exact same way. I always first ask for forgiveness, always. And If you ask for forgiveness, you can only go up from there because they may say no. And so then your next step is to ask for whether or not you can delay the payment. So I start with utilities, and usually I say to them the exact same things. This is what the situation is. This is what we are able to do or that we are not able to do. And so we need to ask for forgiveness so that our school can continue to function in some capacity. And I wait for the response and I go from there. And so if they say no, forgiveness is not possible, and they offer something else, like we can delay the payments out, then I will go in that direction, or I will ask for that. And if they say we can delay it a month, I will say, can we delay it for 3 months? Or is it possible for me to make the minimum amount of this payment for the next 2 months? And then can you delay it, the last one, for a third month? So I'll see what I can go through, and I will tackle all of the utilities in the same way. Most banks are used to that kind of situation. And so when I'm connecting with a bank, I will first, again, ask for forgiveness. Most banks for mortgage payments are not going to say that, but they will often tell you that you can have 30 days leeway, or that you can push your payment 3 months out, that they'll renegotiate. Sometimes they will put it on the back end. Some of them require that you have to rewrite your mortgage contract. They'll redo it and you sign it so that it's clear for both parties that it will extend. Some of them don't require that. They will just say, catch up in 3 months. Are you able to do that? And depending on whether or not, when you look at your cash flow and when you assume that money will come in, if it's a loan and that you're anticipating that the loan will hit within 2 months, give yourself 3 months, just to make sure in case anything goes wrong. And say, yes, I know for sure I can pay this in 3 months and I'll catch up then. If you don't know for sure, don't say that. You don't know for sure, ask if you can rewrite it and put the 3 months on the end, so that you're looking at what is most comfortable for you to be able to handle. When it comes to rents, I will ask the landlord, can you forgive it? And landlords are more often willing to, if it's old property that has been paid off and they aren't paying a mortgage payment on it, they are much more apt to say, yes, we will forgive it. I just had the joy of that occurring for a rental payment that is almost $7,000 a month. And so we were given a forgiveness for 2 to 3 months, which I think is wonderful. But I would always ask for forgiveness first. And if you can't get forgiveness, as opposed to trying to balloon payment it in 3 months, I would first ask, would they be willing to take 50% of the rent, or would they take 50% and delay it for 2 months? I would just negotiate a number of different possibilities around that to see what is your best option. But know that in any case, anyone who receives a payment from someone else regularly, if they have a large client base, be that utilities or be that banks, they're used to people coming to them and asking for some kind of change when there's a circumstance. So start there, as opposed to trying to pay it all when you know that you can't, and when it's going to, one, reflect your stress level, and two, end up affecting your budget, where you're going to get stuck in the negative and not able to pay staff or not able to pay someone else because you have made the hope and assumption that you might be able to do it all when you can't. It's much better to look first at every single thing that you pay and go straight down the line and contact every single person.
Cindy, that seems like great advice. What would you do, though, if a creditor said no, simply no, where I'm not giving you a break and you have to come up with X amount of money in 30 days or something like that? Do you have any suggestions for next steps then?
Well, the first thing that I would say is, somewhere you may get at least one of those who is going to say that this is not something that they can move with at all. And if they can't, they can't. However, the thing that I think is important to also know is that most cities have, if it's a rent, most cities have organizations that work with renters who, in dire situations, you can go to and say, I'm having this trouble with being able to pay my rent, and they will either negotiate with you or give you the rent as a grant or the rent as a loan. And so know that those are things that can also be in your pocket. I would also not it wouldn't be beneath me, I'll say it that way. It wouldn't at all be beneath me, and I have done it before, of asking my parents when I have negotiated what needs to happen in terms of tuition. I have also allowed them to be angels and allowed them to sponsor a portion of something. I've had different angels who sponsored an electric bill before, who sponsored a garbage bill before when I didn't realize that I could just connect with the utilities. And so it wouldn't be beneath me to say to parents, this is one piece that I'm looking at. And I want to know whether or not we have any angels out there who would be willing to sponsor 1/4 of the mortgage payment or 1/4 of the rent payment for X number of months.
I think that that's a really interesting idea. I mean, actually trying to connect the donation that you're asking for to a specific, uh, you know, line item, if you will. The thing that I hear you saying is, look, don't give up, right? Like if, ask for as much as you can get. If the answer isn't no, go to the next thing. Don't just accept the next offer from them, but counter offer. What do you say to people who are just not comfortable with that kind of negotiation? Do you have any tips or suggestions for how to enter that kind of mindset, or how to get good at that?
I would say if you feel that you aren't good at it in person or via Zoom, uh, write it down and send an email and have someone else check you and send it off as an email. Um, and if there's someone else within your school or within your organization who is really good at that, don't be the person who does it. Ask them if they will, because you need to use your strengths. And so if there's someone who has a strength in that particular area and you don't be the person who does it, and allow them to be able to do it. And if you can't do that, then I would definitely say write it down. But it's something that I would say that any head of school or any head of an organization who may have to pull that out of the pocket at one point in time, start to practice. Start to practice with someone to see whether or not it can become more and more comfortable for you, so that if push comes to shove and you have to engage in that way, then you have at least started to practice it so that you can do it. The other thing that I would say is that whether or not you're in a time of distress or not, build relationships. Build relationships with your electric company, build relationships with your banker, build relationships with anybody that you are paying a bill to, so that they come to know you not as the check number, but as the person behind it. Even if when I send off a bill or someone else is writing the bill for me, we put a sticker on, or we say, hope you're having a great week. We always put something that is there that sets us out as the person who has done one more thing apart from just writing the check. And so even if it seems like there's no body behind the receiving end, there's a human being on the other end. And that's where you want to be able to build relationships so that you can connect back in with that person when you need to.
I think one of the hard things about negotiation, over these kinds of bills, is the sense that I'm not negotiating with another person. There's this giant entity on the other end of the phone, and I'm sort of begging hat in hand for this entity to take notice and pity on me. And I think what you're saying is, no, there's a person on the other end, and you're talking to the person. Would you say that's right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I will do one other thing when I'm speaking to someone. If I can't get anywhere, I'm speaking to, gosh, I don't know, a credit card company, and I'm trying to get the charge diminished or eliminated. And they say, no, I can't do that. I will say, will you please let me speak to the person who can?
Uh,
It's a question that I just always ask. May I please speak to the person who can? And if they say there isn't anybody, then I will say, then may I please speak to your manager, because I would just like to hear them tell me that perhaps there is someone else. And I will just stay with that until I can get to the person who will. And usually I would say 95% of the time when I am transferred to the next person up, then whatever it was that I was trying to get eliminated gets eliminated.
Do you ever get flustered in this process? You don't seem like you do.
I would say that it depends on the answer on the other end of the line. Um, that that sometimes I can get flustered, and if I get totally and completely flustered, then I will say, I think I need to think about this and call you back, and I'll hang up, and then it's fresh because I get a fresh person,
Yeah,
and I pull it together. I think out what did I need to say differently, and then I try it again.
that's cool. Would you suggest that when you enter these conversations that you have some kind of list, like so we talked about email, but let's say it's a verbal communication of some kind. I usually do better on the phone myself, but that might just be something about my age. I think in terms of telephones, but um, you know, what I do is I typically have a thought process of like, well, here's what I want, here's what I'd settle for, and a couple steps in between. I mean, do you have any ideas for like how people can map out that sort of strategy when they're in a negotiation?
Yes, and I do have notes. I do have what I call my cheat notes for myself because I don't always get flustered, but sometimes I will lose the word that I think is really important to say. And so I will note what the current situation is that I'm facing, my how long I have been with them, what it is that I know I am supposed to be paying, what the challenge was, if there was some other kind of challenge that made it impossible for me to do that. So we've got a virus that is going on, but the challenge is really that my school lost a certain number of parents in enrollment. And what my ask is. What is my ask around this? Uh, and and so I have that piece always laid out, and I always write the word gratitude at the bottom, so that I remember to be grateful. That as I'm speaking, I appreciate being a part of this company, or I appreciate the fact that you must be working so hard. I appreciate the fact that you must have a lot of calls like this. I always make sure that I'm grateful all through the process. Um, and that I usually write to myself, be persistent, so that I remind myself not to let go of it immediately.
I think that's great advice. When I read was able to get a deferral on one of my mortgages for my building for 3 months, and when I talked to the nice lady at the other end of the phone, I said something like, you probably get a lot of phone calls like this right now," and she just sighed. And she just said, I mean, she was very nice. I mean, she wasn't arguing. She was just like, "Yeah, well, here's what we can do." But she was just sighed. She's like, "Yeah." I mean, I heard exhaustion in her voice. These people are stressed, and they're stressed about their own lives too. It's not just their corporate lives, right?
Yes, and there's a difference between hearing from someone, I I so understand what you must be going through, or I can't even imagine what you must be going through in hearing all of the people that you listen to, versus I cannot pay this. How do you expect me to do this? Why are you sending me this bill when you know that it's impossible for me to pay this? You're going to get a different response from the person on the other end, depending on how you give it. And so for me, I have to write down gratitude so that I just remember that I have to keep that there.
Oh, that is a wonderful attitude. I think that's great advice, Cindy. So I'm going to flip it around, but I'd like to end at the beginning. Can you give any suggestions for people who have not even started, or maybe have barely started this process? Like of trying to figure out how to reduce their expenses, how to negotiate with creditors, and all this stuff. Can you Let's end, if you could, on some suggestions for how they might just get, I mean, because they probably feel overwhelmed, right? I mean, a lot of people are feeling very overwhelmed right now. How do you begin when you're overwhelmed?
Um, Start by breathing, and then take a look at the things that you pay and release the idea that you have to pay all of it. You don't. And then release the idea that you cannot ask someone to forgive it. You can. Release the idea that you cannot ask someone to defer it. You can. And then breathe and then look at them and divide them up according to things that are small monthly payments like utilities and things like that, uh, things that are leases and mortgage and rent. And then create your ask, what your ask needs to look like. Write it out for yourself or give yourself some notes about what it is that you need to say. Or find that person that you know is going to be able to do that well. And then methodically, one at a time, just go down. Um, when you can be, when you can come from your best self, your most confident, positive self, that's when you want to do the ask, not when you haven't pulled it up yet. And so wait until you can do that. And I don't mean wait weeks. I mean, give yourself what you need in order to be able to pull your confidence up, even if that's calling someone and saying, help talk me through the fact that I can do this. And when you can, then methodically just go through and hit each one. And as you see the success start to happen, it may make it easier for you to be able to do the next one. But don't let any of them go. Ask every single one. And I'm putting staff over here. All these other things that are payables. That's what we're talking about tackling, that you need to just do first. And ask every single one, even if there's someone that you know very well, even better. And and start to feel the yes before you ask for it.
Thank you, Cindy. I think that that is excellent advice. I hope that that your school is strong and emerges even stronger after all of this. I know that you've been very helpful working hard with schools around the country to help them weather this difficult time. Very grateful for your time today.
Oh, absolutely. Great to share the gift.